Now to this, Western Cape Premier Alan Winde is in the United States to meet with officials about the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. This amid concerns that South Africa might be kicked out of the AGOA for its stance on Russia-Ukraine conflict. Alan Winde joins us now live from New York. Mr. Winde, appreciate your time. Talk to us about what motivated your recent visit to Washington, D.C. in the U.S. and how it relates to Western Cape's and obviously South Africa's participation in the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
So later this year, there is a review and a meeting of all role players within the AGOA piece of legislation. But we've also heard rumblings over the last few months in the U.S. where there was a lot of concern as to whether South Africa should remain within the AGOA agreement. And, of course, for the province of the Western Cape, that would be very serious should we lose the status of South Africa within the AGOA agreement. And especially for the Western Cape, because we make up a big component of those allowances, and that allows much of our agricultural product to go into the U.S. It enables so many of our new up-and-coming wine farmers to get their products into this market. They've grown many jobs on the back of it. If you look at the export growth of the citrus industry out of the Western Cape using our region and the AGOA and us having black spot free regions. So it is worth billions to our economy, thousands and thousands of jobs. And I'm here on all sorts of trade, foreign direct investment, growing tourism, but AGOA as a serious part of those discussions. Can we get the discussions going early? And we've had a range of meetings from the Ways and Means Committee to the Senate Foreign Affairs or Foreign Relations Committee, to the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We've met U.S. trade representatives. We've gone to meet the offices of Senator Coons, because I think everybody back home has seen the letter that a number of reps and senators have sent to the U.S. to say, please, we need to look at not even hosting the next sitting of the AGOA committee in South Africa. Let's move it somewhere else. So we're under pressure as South Africa, and it is really concerning for me. So that's why we're here. We've got to make sure that for those jobs in our region, for those businesses that have seen growth on the back of AGOA, that we're here fighting for them.
Well, we hear your story, Mr. Winde, and certainly desperate measures. But can you provide some insights into the discussions you had with those senior officials during your visit, and what were the key topics addressed? And obviously, what outcomes are you hoping to achieve?
Okay, so first of all, remember that AGOA is not a trade. It's not a trade agreement between countries. It is a piece of legislation that's written by American lawmakers, agreed by the American House and the Senate. And that law then says these are the African countries that have access with the following products free into the U.S. market. So it's not as if it's a trade agreement. It's actually, you've got to engage with the lawmakers. And of course, the lawmakers are raising many questions about South Africa itself. A lot of the discussion was geopolitical, and I sincerely hope that the president, with his visit now to Russia, to the Ukraine, gets to a space where we can be seen as neutral and trying to find a solution, because that would make a big difference in the U.S. A lot of our meetings we spend too much time talking about the geopolitics and whether South Africa is a friend or a foe, as opposed to saying, these are the products that we're getting into market. What are the new products? What is the new legislation going to look like? How does it start to incorporate the new tech companies and ICT? And, how does AI and the future of trading between Africa and the US look like? And especially from the region that I represent, the Western Cape, because of the changing economy, we're much more services and finance orientated. Of course, we still want all of those agricultural jobs, but what are the new jobs linked to film, linked to tech, health tech, ed tech? And so those are the kind of discussions. That's the meat of the discussions, but they are always clouded by the geopolitics and South Africa-Russia relations.
Mr. Winde, I keep hearing your voice and the voice of what South Africa has to say. Haven't quite heard from you. What did the Americans say to you in turn?
So I think in general there's a a good response to us as the Western Cape, a good response saying, yes, we can see that we would like to get a new piece of legislation on the table. They are also saying to us, or to me, that we need to look at the future, even beyond AGOA. So, of course, AGOA is the next 2 years for the discussions and a piece of legislation, and how quickly can we get it in place. But can this then evolve into a future South Africa-USA trade agreement? And I know that many of the officers that I've met have been speaking about this for a long time. And I think that must be South Africa's next stage, is a proper trade agreement. But in the meantime, over the next 2 years, we've got to make sure that it is AGOA for us.
Mr. Winde, you don't represent, by any stretch of the imagination, I'd like to think, the Department of International Relations or the Department of Trade for South Africa. Why did you see it necessary for you as a Western Cape representative to go and deal with an issue that impacts on the entire South African country? Do you not have confidence in South Africa's structures?
Well, I must say that looking at what was said on some of the House committee motions put into the House, asking questions about South Africa, I must say that even just engaging initially with the officers to say we want to come and meet with you, they were very negative to South Africa. I must say that I think that for me, obviously, it is about our economy. This is the biggest economy in the world. We must make sure that we are playing a part here and trading here. I've also noticed some of the comments back home about trade and DIRCO. I mean, I'm not doing this. I take the DIRCO representatives with me. They sit in the meetings with me. They have been doing so both in Washington and now in New York. I mean, I go there representing the citizens and the businesses and the potential new jobs of the Western Cape. But I also go as a South African, and any of those issues that I've picked up become my homework that I've got to bring back. I've got to take to the President's Coordinating Council. I will take it back to Minister Ibrahim Patel before he visits the U.S. in July. I will definitely make sure, because, of course, South Africa, if South Africa gets exited out of AGOA, it affects the people of the Western Cape. And that's why I've got to make sure the Western Cape is in there. I'm playing my part, and I will bring back what we need to do as a country as well.
So just to clarify, Mr. Winde, this is not a renegade mission. You've had consultation with both those two ministries that you've talked of ahead of your visit.
Absolutely, it's not renegade. It is in the interests of jobs and the economy. I had a long telephone conversation with Ibrahim Patel before I left South Africa. My first call when I got to Washington was to call on the ambassador. A number of our meetings were actually held in the South African embassy in Washington. I had a meeting with potential investors and people who already do business with the Western Cape and with South Africa last night at the consulate in New York. I'm not doing this as a renegade. I'm doing this in the interests of business. I'm doing this in the interest of jobs, and I'm doing it in the interest of the Western Cape, making sure it's got its fair share, and it's dealing with any of the issues that are perhaps going to prejudice South Africa. I will bring those things back and make sure that South Africa does what it needs to do.
Well, let's talk about some of those issues, that conversation that you're going to have with the Department of Trade Minister. What does that conversation look like when you return?
Okay, so I don't want to put all of it out in the public domain, but really it is making sure that we are much more clear on our supposed neutral stance on Russia. I picked up that position in every single meeting. It didn't matter whether it was Republican, it didn't matter whether it was Democrat, it didn't matter whether it was the meetings with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the South African U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I also had meetings with the World Bank and the IMF. That seems to be the elephant in the room. We declare at the United Nations that we're a neutral party. And then, of course, they all raise these issues about what we all know going on in ports, our military ports or airports, and whether we are actually neutral. I think that's the key issue. I have already mentioned that at the PCC with the President and, of course, his mission now that you were reporting on earlier. And I really hope that that helps us as a country get into a position where we can demonstrate what we say and how we vote in the UN, because how we vote in the UN actually has a massive implication to the USA. And then the second part of it, you must remember, it's not about a mutual trade agreement. AGOA is a piece of legislation. It is a law, and it has certain requirements. And if those requirements are a threat to United States security, which is one of the clauses that they use, that can automatically then eject us out of AGOA. Countries in Africa have lost their AGOA status before, whether it be human rights issues in their countries or a war, a civil war or something like that within their country. They automatically lose status, and those are the risks that we run around what they in their clauses call security issues based on U.S. policy.
Mr. Winde, coming back to the purpose of your visit, it's obviously to mitigate the possibility of South Africa losing AGOA in the immediate future. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa, on the other hand, and as are 6 or 7 other African leaders, are in Ukraine and Russia in a few days having a conversation. What should that conversation sound like in order to protect South Africa and certainly the AGOA agreement that we have with the United States?
I think if you're looking at it through an AGOA or a USA lens, it has then got to reinforce what we have said as a country in the United Nations, that we are a neutral party when it comes to the war. Because, of course, remember, the UN, the USA, this is declared as an illegal war where Russia illegally occupied and has gone to war with the Ukraine. We have said in the UN that we are neutral on this position, but then our behavior doesn't show it. So what's got to happen is we've got to reverse that sort of behavior. We've got to create the space. That's what the president needs to be doing, is create the space that shows the world that there's a neutrality here. And we have not been doing that as a country up until now.
And finally, do you see President Cyril Ramaphosa showing neutrality? It in many ways would be an about turn of our current stance, would it not?
It would absolutely be an about turn. But I think, just doing what he's doing now, saying, he wants to meet in the Ukraine, he wants to meet with Russia, with various African leaders, looking at peace broking. Well, that could already be the first start of a showing that, that we want to find peace and we want to be neutral. I think if he's able to do that, it will be, as you say, an about turn. It'll definitely be an about turn from our foreign affairs and some of the positions that we've taken publicly as a country. But I think that's what we need to do. We need to reverse or step back on some of those areas where we've overstepped the neutrality mark. And if we get that right, we will definitely stand in a far better position, enabling further discussions in the U.S. The U.S. refer often to the president's visit to the White House, to President Biden. They refer to that visit, and then they say post that visit we've seen opposite happening within the country to what we've been saying. And so I think that's our big challenge as South Africa. That is our president's big challenge, is to step back or reverse back from some of the sort of showcase that we've put up and come back to a neutral line.
Cape Premier Alan Winde speaking to us from the United States. Appreciate your time this afternoon, sir.